Thank you for just listening to my talk today. I ask that you just embrace the moment and be open to a South African worldview. And as often it is different than what we're used to thinking about in the West. In the West, we're traditionally raised to think about ourselves and not to think of others. It's always about the team of me. And the South African philosophy, Ubuntu, is about how we are all connected to one another. It is an essence of who we are as human and valuing the humanness in each other. One of the major tenets of this South African worldview is that I am because you are. I am because we are. So there is something in me that values the something in you. And going forward, we will begin to see how if we look at current events that are going on in 2016, there is a lack of humanity. There is a lack of valuing and seeing value in others, in particular, people who don't necessarily look like us, live like us. And why is that the case? So, in that, I start with sharecropping. And some of you might say, well, why is she going all the way back to sharecropping? That was eons ago. Well, really, it wasn't that long ago. Typically, every time I talk, I always have cotton in my hand. And if you ever have seen cotton or what it is a very dense and hard material. To pick it and to peel it can leave blisters on your fingers. So I was that child that every 2 weeks in the summer, we would go visit my grandma in Columbus, and that was like my mom's break, right? She would send the kids to Columbus, and I still don't know what she was doing for those 2 weeks. I just know I talked to her periodically as we were going to bed. But my grandmother would tell me of stories of how she and her brothers and sisters would have to pick cotton in the fields before and after school and during the summer months. And so when I would get history lessons in school, in my mind, this was so far away. So how could someone that I know have picked cotton? And so listening to those stories, we would always talk. And it was at a time when hip hop and rap was just starting to come on the scene. I always tell my daughter, I remember when, hip hop began, and then I become the not cool mom. So my grandmother asked me a question one time, and she said, why is your generation so angry? And I remember I didn't have a response, and I said to her, well, why is your generation not? You picked cotton. You picked cotton alongside other children before and after school. Why are you not angry? So I would listen to those stories and hear the distress and the pain in her voice, but also hear the hope in humanity. Still hear the hope and the love that she had for people. And I could not understand it. Till this day, sometimes it boggles my mind when I turn on Facebook and see all of the things that are going on. And how can I still have hope? But I have hope because there were people, there were people who were picking cotton in the fields that thought of me before I even existed. So that is why I have hope, and that is why I always carry cotton, because each one of you sitting in this room have on a piece of material that has a blend of cotton. So even in 2016, even though I have not picked the cotton fields, even though you may not have picked the cotton fields, but I'm sure there are some of you in this room that could also tell some stories of what it was like living during that era and time. We are all connected by that collective historical memory. So I have a picture of black and white children who were in the fields together, but they had different roles. Some were afforded privileges that others didn't. So as the granddaughter of a cotton picker who ended up going to college, My grandmother, she moved to the north with her older sister and ended up graduating college, affording me the ability to be a third-generation college student. So as I listened to those stories, what were the children of those landowners? What are they telling their grandchildren? What collective history are they passing on? So we move forward to Freedom Summer of 1963, and some of you are probably like, Fannie Lou Hamer, why does she have this woman up here? At the age of 37, Fannie Lou Hamer decided that she was going to go and register to vote. Here it is in 1963. She was 37 years old. She also worked the cotton farms. She is alongside members of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, who were college students. So when we look at our history, we see generations of people working together so that one can achieve just basic human rights of voting. It wasn't until, maybe a few years ago, we went to a family reunion in Memphis, Tennessee, and I was reading a book about Fannie Lou Hamer on the airplane, and I met a cousin who came up from Mississippi. And Fannie Lou Hamer picked cotton in the same county as my family did, Ashtabula County, Mississippi. So when Fannie Lou Hamer decided that she was gonna vote, she was evicted from her home. She, her husband, and her children were evicted from her home. And they were rescued by a name of the woman. Her name was Maggie Spearman, Margaret Spearman. Come to find out that Margaret Spearman is a distant cousin of my great-grandmother. So just to see the interconnectedness of who someone that I looked up to, who someone we wrote about in the book that I published on Black women activists, that I find this out years after the book was published, that someone in my family took her in at a moment when she did not know where she was going to go, and she just wanted to vote. So during this time, when they were registering to vote, they went to a place called Stacy's Cafe, and you all know the story, right? In the South, you had blacks would eat in one place and whites would eat in another place, and you couldn't intermingle. Well, this was the only place to eat in this town, so they decided that they were going to get something to eat. Well, that didn't go too well. They were put in jail, and Fannie Lou Hamer was beat to a pulp. She was beat so bad that she was blind in her left eye. Her kidney and her liver were bruised. Years later, when she had gotten sick and passed away, it was because of what she had endured during that beating. And so I put the picture of the kosh here because they used that in '63, but it's very similar to the batons that we see now when young college students are protesting police brutality and things of that nature. It's a very similar instrument. If you know the density of a kosh, it is very dense. If you get hit with one, it could break your bones. So the batons that police officers carry, those instruments that are used often as instruments of force are very, very detrimental. So when we're watching the news and we see that people get hit with these things, their pain and their tears are not, they're not fake by any means. It's really, really, really bad. So during this beating that Fannie Lou Hamer endured, she was able to testify to the Credentials Committee of the Democratic National Convention. And there are two details that stick out to me during her testimony. The first one, while she was in jail, and they were caring for her 24/7 because at this point they thought she was going to die. The jailer's wife, and back then in the jails, those police officers or sheriffs, there was a house attached to the jail, why we call it the jailhouse. So they lived very in close proximity to the jail. The jailer's wife asked her, did she want some water? And she said, no, please bring me a Bible. And so she had the jailer's wife read scripture to her all night long. And while she was reading scripture to her, the other college students, that had also endured beatings, they sang old civil rights songs and Negro spirituals. And one of the songs that they continuously to sing all night was, I'm gonna lift my brother up, he's not heavy. I'm gonna lift my brother up, he's not heavy. I'm gonna lift my sister up, she's not heavy. I'm gonna lift my sister up, she's not heavy. And that kept her through that entire night. So as she was telling her story, she said she always wondered, how did the jailer's wife feel after she heard Negro spirituals and songs of praise and read the Bible after she had witnessed this brutal beating that they put on these college students and Fannie Lou Hamer? So that's one thing I want us to think about, is that when we do something to one another, we're affected by that. A piece of us has to die just a little bit. I can't see you in pain and feel good. That's just the nature of how the universe works, right? As long as there are no aliens coming, right? So when we have that, then we are valuing each other's humanity. So in that, what did that jailer's wife, what was going on with her at that time? We don't know, but that was always a question that Fannie Lou Hamer, she always had that thought. A second thing was that people always say, when I teach, I always dress very, very nice. I always have on a skirt and 2-hour heels. I'm getting a little, plus 40, so I'm gonna have to find a little kitten heel because the 2-hour heel isn't working as much. But I always dress nice, and people always say, why do you dress so nice? You're teaching for 4 hours at a time, you should dress more comfortably. Well, when those college students and when those men and women were marching so that I could have the right to vote and that I could have the right to go to college, they marched in their Sunday's best. They had on dresses and nice slacks and ties. And so that is one way that I stay connected to the spirit of civil and human rights, is to pay homage to the women and men who were probably tired, but they thought of me. So when we think of Ubuntu, it is a dialogue, it is a way of being. It is also based in restorative justice. So we have to begin to heal and acknowledge the humanity in one another so that we can then move forward. The United States has not done a good job of coming to grips and healing our past because we see same things going on in 2016. So those of us in this room have to begin to recognize that we are connected. We all are wearing cotton. We are all connected. Aren't these babies cute? I am because we are. We are because they are. At what point do those children not become children? I am Trayvon Martin. We are Trayvon Martin. At what point is he not a child? At what point was he not a child? At what point was this young lady not a child who had just lost her grandmother and her mother within 4 weeks? At what point do we not recognize the humanness in her to drag her across the classroom like a rag doll? At what point did her not saying one word warrant that behavior? At what point do we not value the humanness in one another? At what point can our children not have interracial friends and go swimming and there not be assumptions about who they are? At what point do they deserve to have a gun drawn on them? At what point do we not treat everyone's children like our children? Our assumptions. What do we assume about other people's children, about other people? How are our assumptions driving our behavior? When we turn on the news and we see children that are being mistreated in the institutions in which we trust them, schools, the police, how are we still connected? How are we valuing the humanness in them? We are all connected by a code of humanity, thus building a bridge that will transcend generations. What will this bridge look like? Will your bridge be built on Ubuntu, building community and seeing the humanity and the humanness in others? Or will it not? And what will that look like? Thank you.